Taylor, how are you? Welcome to the conversation.
Hey Aaron, good to see you. Good to chat with you today. I'm excited to hang out for the next hour or two.
Thanks for coming on, man. I know literally 2 seconds ago, the internet on the floor where I have my studio set up completely cut out the video and lag. So ran downstairs with the LED and we tried to make it work as best as possible with Taylor's feedback. So the lighting isn't the best, but the conversation will still be great. So just to give everyone an understanding of who you are, I'll do a little like quick introduction. So grew up in Alberta. You got your bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Alberta, 2018. You got your master's in aerospace engineering from the University of Toronto in 2020, where you published multiple first author peer reviewed papers, which frankly is pretty unheard of for someone to do that many during their master's program while maintaining a 4.0 GPA. You're almost done your PhD in mechanical engineering at Stanford University. And we just talked about that, the next like month or two, it's looking like it'll be official. And your focuses are on high temperature reaction kinetics, elementary reaction rates, and advancing propulsion systems for improved power, efficiency, and reduced pollution, sorry, not population. Hey now, hey now,
Yeah.
hey now. Also, you have a private pilot's license from Edmonton Flying Club. You're an avid tennis player, and something we'll talk in more detail later. You also train very heavy for a nerd. You
That's
just squatted 405.
right.
You're closing on a 500-pound deadlift and a 300-pound bench. Not too common in your world of study. Above all that, I think probably what you're the most proud of, in my opinion, would be that you're happily married and you still make consistent time to volunteer at your church every Sunday. Also known as the man that has never been untimely to any of my messages for the last half decade. Well, welcome to the show, conversation, whatever you want to call it. I'm curious, and I thought about this while I was reading this off and this crazy resume of things. Do you think you're super smart?
Um, you know, Stanford changed that a lot. There's a whole it's interrelated to a lot of things, but um one of my reasons for trying to pursue a PhD is because I thought I was super smart. And so having been here certainly has humbled me a lot. Um, for many reasons. So I would say, I mean, certainly, I've done well in school, and so, um, and I definitely have aptitude towards certain things, but I don't think that I'm, um, I wouldn't say I'm like better in that sense, if that makes sense.
It's interesting because we've known each other now for 5 or 6 years.
Hmm.
And being honest with you, because I know you can handle me poking you a little bit. When we first met, I've always liked you from day one, but when we first met, you landed to me as kind of like a very almost egocentric hotshot at getting your master's at U of T.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so much like egotistical where it was off putting in your face, but I also felt like you felt like maybe because of certain credentials, you were better than other people. Now, to be fair, the very cool part is that where you sit today, I have not felt that from you in probably 2 years. You've completely changed your perspective, maybe, or how you show up in the world for other people. So I'm
Hmm.
curious, what was the catalyst of change for you? And did that change produce better results in terms of like your overall well-being?
Yeah. So I mean, I think the we're getting right into it right away. So I think that you are right that when we first met, I definitely thought I was the bee's knees, and I was yeah, Mr. Hotshot. Um, yeah, I mean, I was riding high, applying to all these schools, got into uh, had offer letters from Stanford, Texas A&M, UCLA. Like it was fine. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do really well. Um, and I still carried on that attitude for my first year at Stanford. I did well in my classes, and I kept on lifting and training. And I thought, okay, I just have to work harder than everyone, and I'm going to keep on maintaining my position as Mr. Hotshot. Um, and so we can get into this more in detail later. But ultimately, I realized, and by God's grace, that God must exist, and so that and that Christianity must be true. And so that I think is really the catalyst for all these changes because there's a whole bunch of theology behind this, but as you've said, there's evidence in the past few years that I've changed a lot in my perspective, my demeanor, and my attitude. And so I think that really very much does just come from knowledge of God and God's action in my life. And so that's the biggest thing. And so I'm happy to chat and explain reasons for which I became a Christian and all these things. But um, yeah, I think that's the biggest reason. And to answer the second part of your question regarding whether it's produced fruit and made my well being better, I would say absolutely. So perhaps I don't think it necessarily has contributed to more academic success, though. I mean, um, I think by I don't think it's made it worse necessarily either. Um, could have made it better too, but separate from that, in my personal life, it's been huge. So one of the things that is that I used to get sick all the time because I was working my butt off doing too many things, trying to lift heavy in the gym, play tennis, maintain my grades, and do all these things with work, etc. Um, and that continued even once I got existence was and once I learned that one of the Ten Commandments is thou shalt honor the Sabbath and keep it holy, which long story short, you shouldn't work on the Sabbath. You shouldn't be striving for to put food on your table. And so, um, but through meeting my wife, which also wouldn't have happened had I not come to know God exists. Uh, she's been really helpful in helping me actually like take a proper day off and actually honor that commandment and trust in God's providence. And so that, as you know now, the whole time I've been married, I haven't gotten sick since then. Like that's crazy, 2 years almost, and I haven't gotten sick. Whereas before I was going like totally down for the count every 5 6 months or something with like a bad flu. So I'd have to take a week or two off training and then get back to it. Um, that's been a huge blessing, and also um, well, I mean, I have a wife now. She's fantastic. And so, yeah, without that wouldn't have happened. It definitely would not have happened. Or at least I would not have married someone as wonderful as Jess um, without God's grace. So that's hope that answers your question. We can chat, but yeah, I'm happy to give way more details on all of it.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I'll disclose real quick is that Taylor and I have worked together for, geez, half a decade now. Taylor has put his faith in me to do all of his personal training, programming from afar. We also did some work on nutrition, but once I learned that you're a robot, and once you eat a certain way and it's really full, healthy whole foods, and you track every gram that you eat, from there I really haven't talked about nutrition because I just know that's something you nail. So I think that's important when people are like, how does he know all this information about his personal life? I think it's really cool in your story, and it's hilarious how this started out pretty quick out the gates, but it is what it is. I think we should just continue on through the Christianity part now, if you're okay with that,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I think
cool.
that there is, while we're on topic, it's probably going to be a good transition. So I like to stay on that. So this is the first time I've ever shared this publicly. So this is exciting for me. Is I did not believe in God or Christianity until about a year ago. And what changed that for me was two people,
Hmm.
Wes Huff and yourself. You told me one day, you sent a video of this debate, and I was like, cool, I'll check out the debate. And I was someone that knew a little bit about Billy Carson, but I also knew that he was seen as someone who presents a lot of great information and true information. I watched that debate, and I think everyone that's watched that debate quickly saw maybe on that certain topic, he wasn't maybe as an expert as we thought he was potentially. And West Hop really shifted my perspective quickly. So then I went down the West Huff rabbit hole when he's been on like, I don't know, he's been like Rogan and Huberman, or I don't know where he's been, but he's been on a bunch of podcasts. The second thing that shifted for me was you. And this is just my own perception, but I think a lot of people feel the same way, that people who get their PhDs in sciences are pro evolution, not don't have a huge faith in Christianity. And you are someone who I would consider at the pinnacle of science in your field, doing aerospace research as for a PhD student at Stanford. Yet during that time frame, you switched your perspectives a bit into your belief in God. And I've never said this before, but I think a month ago you actually had me doing Bible study with you. And
That's
I'm
right.
curious of what do you think were the main drivers of you switching over? And the second question, and you can answer this however you want, it's a big question, is with all of your world-class expertise at analyzing and studying whether information is empirical, whether it's bunk,
Hmm.
it far exceeds most of the world. What convinced you that Jesus walked this earth? And I think it's valuable for people to hear that perspective because it was enough to completely change my worldview. So I'll leave you with those two big questions.
All right. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I guess I grew up uh, not in a Christian home, and so my um, I didn't I didn't go to church. I didn't really hear the notion of God until I had some Christian friends in high school, and I had cousins and stuff that went to church and things. But um, yeah, I didn't really know anything about it. Um, and when I met my Christian friends in high school, so this ties in with me thinking I was the bee's knees. Um, I did well in school, and I was good at music, good at sports, and um, did school was easy for me. And so whenever like classic atheist, that whenever someone said, "Oh yeah, God exists for all these reasons," like, "Oh, it's obvious that's not the case because evolution must be true," as you touched on, for example. Um, and yeah, I didn't really think much of it, and I thought they were, just had just been indoctrinated um, by their parents. And so when I got invited to church by one of my friends, and her dad was the pastor, and I remember I found his preaching unsatisfactory. He started talking about the burning bush. That's Exodus, Moses being called by God, and I thought he was absolutely nuts because bushes don't just naturally catch on fire. That's obviously insane. It violates physical laws. I was doing well in physics at the time, et cetera, et cetera. Now I'm doing my PhD in mechanical engineering. So I still think that bushes don't just catch on fire. And so I just rejected religion outright because um, it violated what we know to be about physical laws. And so that was kind of that. And I carried on through undergrad, had a good time and doing whatever I pleased. And I um, kept on going through a master's degree, the same thing. And so then a big pivotal thing that happened um, is during the pandemic. The I managed to have a bunch of time on my hands, and also at the time living in Canada, um, our government, the Canadian government's response was handing out stimulus checks to everyone, giving them like $1,000 a month or something like that, and that started to raise alarm bells for me because I'm like, wait a second, I'm a taxpayer, right? So where's this money coming from? What ramifications is that going to have? And so that led me down a whole rabbit hole of um, reading books on economics and law, um, and so the rub from all that reading, if you're reading about economics and law, you get a bunch of history along the way. And so the thing that became clear from all that was, okay, if you start reading about history, like you realize humans are really bad. Like we just consistently um, do bad things. Like you can look at just all the war, like the 20th century. I mean, just look at that. All the wars, all the death, all the murder. Um, there's adultery, there's theft, there's um, murder, and then lying, false witness, etc. So, and we all just want, uh, we all covet after one another's things, and so, anyways, it becomes clear that humans are really really bad, and that that is yeah, that I don't think that could be debated. Um, Another thing that happened is starting reading books on law, and in that process, there's you learn that okay, we penalize murder more strongly than we penalize theft. Let's say, right, the petty theft, killing someone is should be punished more strongly than stealing a stick of gum. Um, but the question hit me that like okay, well, why that doesn't that answers why we have our legal structure. For example, we don't want to have people out there murdering all the time, but it doesn't actually answer why murder is wrong. Like it says how we can arrange our laws to disincentivize it, but it doesn't say if ultimately murder is wrong. And so, not that I was contemplating murder at the time, nor have I really. Um, but it's just like if murder is not wrong, then what is wrong, right? Because if someone's not alive and they have no more say in anything, there's no more action, there's no more free will, and so um, that question really struck me. And that was actually at the time I was at Stanford by that point. So pandemic started, and I was kind of 2020 there, and had worked for a year at the University of Toronto, and so I had that job was relatively not busy. So I, was doing all this reading over it. So this is like a two year period. So due to me being at Stanford, and um, I had this murder question, and so it's funny. I hadn't really met any Christians or anybody I knew who was religious at that time up until coming to Stanford, and so then anyways, being in California, having been raised in Alberta, I there's some political differences between Alberta and California, and so I started talking openly about a few things that I thought, and that was not met very well, with some of the folks that were at the school, and so that catalyzed a friendship between myself and this guy who's a Texan. Um, was also in my lab because he actually had read a bunch of the same books I had, and so we had a friendship there. I also respected him because he did he managed to better me on a fluid mechanics problem, and so I was already doing well here, but I couldn't figure out one problem. And he came along, and was like, oh yeah, it's simple, yada yada yada, right? So I respected his intellect in that respect, and so trusted him and found out that we also read a whole bunch of the same books. And I also found out that he was a Christian because he reminded me of some of my friends from high school who were also Christians. And so this was all happening kind of at the same time. I had this murder question: why is murder wrong? Because if there's the other thing that's true that really vexed me about this murder question is that from physics we know um, the big thing with right now the accepted theory is the Big Bang, right? And so that's derived from physical laws that we can infer based on experiment and observation. And the idea is that okay, well, let's say we have the first law of thermodynamics that there's conservation of energy, and then there's the second law of thermodynamics that everything tends to a greater degree of disorder over time. Um, so what that what you can if you conceptualize that, you can say okay, there is a start to the universe that everything was like in a really ordered state, and then eventually it just all expands, and then everything will become disordered and there will be no more useful energy left and everything will die. And so that's true and that's consistent with observation. And so I knew, okay, we have the start of the universe and then we have the end and everything's going to die. And so again, the murder thing is I didn't have an answer. My atheism didn't give me an answer because the universe is going to end. Therefore, everyone's going to die. And so if murder if someone commits murder, then they're just getting someone to their ultimate end a little bit faster. And then there's no ultimate meaning to any of it all. And so the big problem I then had was okay, under that worldview, we're just saying, oh, we're alive, murder's wrong, but we're all going to die. So then nobody really has a stand to take. And if murder's not wrong, there's no right or wrong. And that means there's no better or worse. There's no basis for rationality. So um, as a scientist, as someone who's studying all these things, my impetus for doing them is because I think that some good can be derived from the things I'm studying. I think that okay, if I measure these reaction rates more accurately, then we can use computer models to more accurately design engines, let's say, and then burn fuel more efficiently. We can then bring energy to we can make engines more efficient. You can use more energy, have more useful work. We can bring people out of poverty, or we can make planes fly faster, more efficiently, things like that. And so that uh, presupposes a value structure and that there's things that are good and bad. And so I realized that again, my atheism had no answer for any of these things. Um, and so I was in a big problem. I was like, okay, I'm an atheist. I reject the existence of God because I think well, miracles are impossible. But then I realized, oh, there's no rationality, there's no basis for anything I'm doing without the existence of God. And so um, I realized, okay, a God must exist. Um, the question is, which religion is correct? So, because if someone says, oh, okay, all these different religions, they're all kind of correct. It's like, no, that's not true. Like, if they say different things, they're contradictory, and therefore one of them must be right. And so we should be able to infer based on, or at least have a pretty good estimate, pretty good guess, based on the evidence, which one is correct. God must exist as this answer to this philosophical problem. So cue to a whole bunch of reading and discussions with my friend um, Devin. And so um, the there are kind of different world religions. There's atheism, which has no God. There's um, just modern spirituality, which doesn't say anything about anything. Just says that oh, I think I could just seek pleasure or pursue what makes me feel good, and that's what the universe wants me to do. There's the Eastern religions, or I guess as I'm referring to them, so that would be well, I guess Buddhism falls into the former category as well. Again, seeking Buddhism acknowledges that life sucks and that you should avoid that based on just like reducing your desires. Eastern religions being Hinduism, Sikhism, um, and those, if I remember correctly, are they claim there is a God, but he's one with the universe, and so then again, that doesn't make a lot of sense for this problem. Um, in that if I'm trying to answer the question of why murder is wrong, if God is part of the universe and one part of the universe kills another part of the universe, there's again no ultimate answer to why that's wrong. Moreover, there's no ultimate incentive structure. So like I think that hell must exist in order for me to not want to murder, right? Like so if hell doesn't exist, then Hitler got away with it for free, right? Like because we all meet the same end, whether or not if we all die, Hitler died, and he just got to let's say Holocaust gratified his desires, then he got away with it. If there's no hell, there's no ultimate justice, and so those are out. And so you're left basically with the Abrahamic religions that God must be separate from the universe. He must be the creator, and so like the things I mentioned before, the first and second law of thermodynamics means okay, there is some God, some entity that can create this ordered state and create everything. Like he has to exist outside of time, matter, and energy in order to be able to create those things. Um, and so that means that the Abrahamic religions would satisfy that. And so then there's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And so they all three of those tell that the Bible, or at least so there's the Old Testament with Judaism, which is first half of the Bible. There's the Christianity, which is the Old and New Testaments. The New Testament being containing the Gospels, and then letters from the epistles from the apostles. And then there's the Quran and Islam, which holds that these were true, but then got corrupted, and that's a whole thing. For anyone who's interested, you can look at. There's a recent interview with a guy named David Wood uh, on a podcast called Pints with Aquinas. This guy David Wood is a Christian, but he used to be a murderer and a or at least attempted murderer, and is now a Christian apologist. And so, anyways, he goes through reasons for which the Quran is false. And so then you're left okay, Judaism and Christianity. Judaism satisfies all the things I just said. So um, it has a God that exists outside of universe, and there's he's created all these things. He is told, for example, with the Ten Commandments, he has commanded. Well, first, he's demonstrated his existence and his that he has authority um, by the burning bush, for example. The point of miracles, if you recall, I said I didn't like. I thought that religious folks were, crazy because of miracles, right? But the thing is, if you have a God that exists outside of time, matter, and energy, and He's all powerful, then He can intervene in His creation. Like if you made a video game, um, you could go in and mess with the characters, and the characters in the video game, let's say they were sentient, they could be like, "Whoa, what's that? This doesn't make any sense." It would seem as a miracle, and so God can definitely make those miracles happen, and in fact, that's necessary for us to know that He exists. Well, not strictly speaking, but to know that He is actually speaking to us. So, for example, um, Moses seeing the burning bush um, tells you, okay, Moses sees this bush. Bushes don't catch on fire. That's really weird. Now this bush is speaking to me. Oh boy, that must be God. Likewise, then the plagues that follow in the Exodus with Pharaoh. If anyone, you can read the book of Exodus. Um, that would be these things don't happen. This is God demonstrating His power and His control over His creation, and that He is to be feared. And so Judaism has that. It has the um, this God who created everything and then can mess with it and actually cares about His creation in there. And so then there's the book of Leviticus, which tells Israel how they can purify themselves and make sure they're right before God. Because so then, if I'm trying to answer this question of why is murder wrong, God has to tell me, okay, this is right, this is wrong. But humans, right, from human history, we know that humans mess up so consistently, and indeed that's also true in the Bible, right? Like right away, the story of Cain and Abel, right after the fall, um, Cain murders Abel, and that's that. We know that sin is bad. So then, if we all sin before a holy God, then He can justly say, okay, no, you guys are all cast into hell. But if we realize, oh no, I don't want to go to hell, that sounds really bad. Sounds like eternal fire. Then um, God, in His kindness, gives us a way to like make atonement for our sin. And so, um, in the book of Leviticus, there's all these details on how one can make themselves pure and clean, um, and put themselves right with God. And so, um, there's there's two ways you can do it. Basically, you have sacrifices at the tabernacle. That was when Israel was mobile and moving around a bunch. And then there's the temple, which is the permanent place in Jerusalem, I think. And so um, you can follow all these Levitical laws and purify yourself with in accordance with all these rules and regulations that are prescribed very clearly, um, and then you can make yourself right with God. But that requires the tabernacle or the temple. And so, if the temple is destroyed, which it was 70 AD, then you have no means by which you can atone for your sin anymore. And so, um, Christianity, long story short, Jesus is the perfect sacrifice. There's so many analogies to Passover lamb. We can get into all that, but anyways, Jesus makes the perfect sacrifice of him being the Son of God, living a sinless life, and then being murdered by um, Israelites on a cross under the hand of Pontius Pilate, and um, then he's risen 3 days later. So he's atoned for the sin, then he's also defeated death. And so by placing your faith in Christ, you trust that Christ's death pays the price for your sins, and then you have good standing before God, and um, and then you can also be assured of eternal life and adoption to sonship. There's all these other things that go along with the Christian theology. So that's kind of the long story, and I've glossed over a whole lot of details. This was a very comprehensive thing that occurred, but anyways, it became clear to me that basically God must exist for. To summarize, God must exist for murder to be wrong. God has to tell us that murder is wrong, and that we, well, I guess we know in our bones because we're image bearers. That's why I know, for example, that murder is wrong. I don't necessarily need to be told, but hearts are deceitful, and so we sin and we make mistakes. Um, we do things that are counter to God's will, and so um, in order to be able to be put right with God, there has to be sacrifice. And so then, yeah, Christianity, I think, is the only one that satisfies all those requirements, and it must be true in my opinion. And so, um, I think that answers your questions there. It's a kind of a long-winded way of saying it, but yeah, that's how I arrived at the position, and it was very helpful to have one of my friends kind of point me in the right direction, and not you can there are lots of sources that can demonstrate that these things would have said are true. So yeah,
The good
more
old
questions if you
Texan.
wish. That's right. Yeah.
The no, it's great, man. I think for me in this conversation, if you're gonna cook like that, I'll just say a few words and get on with my day. There's a lot of great detail there, so I appreciate it. You know, something interesting that I've noticed. So I grew up in a Catholic school
Hmm.
where you'd go to mass every fourth week as a school. Uh, we would have Bible study. It wasn't like to the point where you're at um, what's the word, like a not a nunnery, or like, you know what I'm saying, like when you go to those places where it's like a bunch of nuns that live there and all you do is
Yeah.
Bible study. It's not like that to that extent, of course, but there was a pretty good fundamental teaching around Jesus and God and those kinds of things. One thing I find interesting is in society now, because I'm 33, if you mention God or believing
Hmm.
in it, as you kind of said earlier, a few 10 minutes ago, people kind of look at you like you're crazy or think you're crazy. And I
Hmm.
feel like that's also going to depend on where you are geographically, of course.
Yeah.
I live in this place similar to San Fran and Stanford and all of that in Ottawa, but I feel like it's shifted a lot in my life. However, the last 2 or 3 years, I see the pendulum coming back. And one thing that I have said recently and has convinced me more and more to look into Christianity is I'm of the belief that if every man, as an example, followed Christian values, this world would
Hmm.
be infinitely better than it is now. And I
Yeah.
don't believe that anyone could possibly argue that differently. And then when I reflected on that in my life, this is a good story because this happened with you and I actually. I got an invitation to a different city
Hmm.
on short notice to go on a beautiful date with a beautiful woman. And that drive would have taken me probably 2 hours there, had dinner, hung out, whatever, 2 hours back. I had some other obligations in my life. And those obligations were surrounding helping my family out on the farm get things done, feed the chickens, what have you. And I texted you, I don't know if you remember, but I said, how do you manage lust? And you gave me some advice or some feedback. And I believe that my faith, actually not believe, I know that my faith in Christianity and what it prophesizes about lust, when I thought through that lens, I decided to not make that 2 hour drive
Hmm.
because it was a very lustful endeavor. And
Hmm.
I don't think as a man, I am good if I am sinking into my temptations versus doing what I should do as a man, and that's being a provider for my family and what they need from me. So the
Hmm.
reason why I use that specific story is it did kind of happen semi recently. And I just feel like if people in general followed the Ten Commandments to the best of their ability, they'd be far better off in their life. But a lot of people don't even have an awareness like I didn't have to them. So now that I have an awareness of these Ten Commandments, for an
Hmm.
example, there's many decisions that I want to make in my life because I'm human
Hmm.
and I don't do them because it is sinful. So I think that in and of itself was enough for me to start realizing that in any given moment, if I follow these rules or commandments, you would know more about the proper verbiage than me. People might micromanage my words. I'm not an expert on
Hmm.
Christianity. This is not hyperbole. I've never made a bad decision. since I started thinking through that lens. And the only times I
Hmm.
have made bad decisions is when I decided not to listen to those 10 commandments. So I think that speaking openly, people who show kind of negativity, like your experience when you first got to Stanford, or my experience living in the liberal hub of Canada, if you will, that in Vancouver, is no, like if you guys actually followed those principles, your life would be much better. You'd be more disciplined. You'd be a better partner, a better husband, better wife, better coworker. You wouldn't succumb to addiction and these kinds of things like I have in my life. So I don't think that I think it's far more crazy not to believe in Christianity, and I'm not implying that you are crazy if you don't. But I think if you have the option between the two, it's far more rational, logical, and makes more sense to believing there's a God and follow the ways of Christianity than not. So that's kind of like my rant on Christianity.
Hmm.
Obviously, I don't know the details, like all the details that you do, but I think that's just a really easy way for common folk, common brains, common IQ folks like myself to use it as an application to improve their lives.
Yeah. So I mean that's definitely true, and you can so there's a bunch of caveats though. So I mean God's creator of the universe, and so he designed it, and um, religious legalism and just adhering um, to God's laws. If He's the creator, um, it's kind of the playbook for how to live a good life. But that's not that's not really the point, right? And so the yes, you'll have benefits. And so let's say um, I think Mormonism is false, for example, but it teaches a lot of the same things. For example, behaviorally, okay, uh, don't murder, don't steal, putting the polygamy aside, for example, but don't commit adultery, don't uh, lust, honor the Sabbath, all these things, and so it can by adhering to those, you can have um, success, but that's not really the point of Christianity. So I guess the caveat that I'll say is yes, that these there are the commandments, but they point to our need for Jesus. And so for me, for example, I mentioned how um, I failed consistently to um, honor the Sabbath. I always worked all the time, and that's because I wasn't trusting in God's providence. And so that's one of the Ten Commandments. There, I'm number one is I'm the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. And number two is you shall not make idols, make images, and bow down and worship them. Don't make false gods. Number three is thou shalt honor the name of the Lord and don't misuse God's name effectively. Don't use it as a cuss word or anything like that. Um, thou shalt honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. So work 6 days and then rest the seventh and honor God with it. Honor your mother and father is number five. Number six is thou shalt not murder. Number seven is thou shalt not commit adultery. Number eight is thou shalt not steal, I believe. And thou shalt not commit, or thou shalt not bear false witness. I sometimes get eight and nine mixed up, but those are for sure two of them. And number 10 is thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife, their property, things like that. And so that I give the example of the Sabbath for me because that's like a very clear violation of command. But there's also um, what Jesus does in the Sermon on the Mount is he connects, for example, murder and anger, or lust and adultery. And so, there's I really don't think there's a man in history who hasn't lusted other than Jesus. He's perfect. Um, and so, like, where does adultery start? Right? It starts with that look, that glance. And it's not as though marriage is a fix. It makes it easier. But if marriage fixed it and you just had your one partner, then adultery wouldn't be a problem because you get married and then it would no longer be a problem. But no, adultery still happens. People step outside of their marriages all the time. It's very sad. And so yeah, there's absolute benefit to keeping God's laws and adhering to these things, and you will see, for me, I haven't gotten sick in 2 years. Like it's fantastic, it's amazing. But that's not the point. What it is it points to our need for the fact that we don't have right standing before God. We have all violated God's laws in different ways, and ultimately we need God's grace because hell's real. I think I gave good reasons for why. hell must be real. You know, again, Hitler got away with it for free. If there's a great his name's Jeffrey Dahmer. He was a serial killer, and he became a Christian when he was in prison. So what his quote was, I might be misquoting it, but roughly speaking, it was, I didn't really see anything wrong with the murder because there's no one who I'm ultimately accountable to. If murder satisfied my desires, I could just go and do it. Um, and yeah, he had no with his atheism, he had no reason um, to withhold from satisfying these desires. It was all very selfish. It's all about gratifying his own desires, of course, in a very wicked and vicious way, being a serial killer. But the even in just one can be really really good. Like there's lots of people that are really good. They don't murder. They're super kind. They aren't angry. They're very generous with their time, with their money. Um, they don't commit adultery, or they don't even lust. They try to make sure they're very respectful of everyone. But ultimately, that's still we still have a heart problem. Like all of us, we're still sinners before God, and um, we've all violated God's laws, and so there's nothing we can do now. There's no temple, for example, to be able to offer for burnt sacrifices and things like that to make ourselves right with God. Ultimately, we need Jesus to do that work for us, and so He did it on the cross. And by so Ephesians 2 8 9 says Ephesians chapter 2 verses 8 9 says you're saved by grace through faith, and it's not by works, so that no one may boast. And so one might be able to think that um, okay, if let's say I live really, really good life, and I can go and stand before God and say, look at all these great things I've done. You should let me in, and you should give me eternal life. But then what God would be able to do is you'd be able to say, okay, no, look at your heart. You were angry in this instance. You were like, even God's standards are so high that, even though some of us are a little bit better at keeping these laws than others, um, there's none of us that could ultimately stand before a perfect, holy God, this creator who is the very definition of good. And so, yeah, there is, again, just to reiterate, there is benefit, and of course, I've just seen it in my own life. There's benefit in honoring the Sabbath, for example, or abstaining from lust. I'm now happily married. My wife is fantastic. Um, but yeah, it's not the point. Ultimately, I know that I still stumble. I'm still a sinner in the sight of God, and so I need to humbly put my trust in Christ's redeeming work on the cross.
I think that that is a really good way to put a bow on Christianity. I feel like the way we're both invested into it, you more than me in Christianity, but I still am invested into it. And
Hmm.
obviously, you're someone that's taught me a lot about it. I've learned a lot from this conversation alone. We could talk about this for probably 5 hours. So
Yep.
I think that what we've talked about here today for that piece of it kind of closes the chapter that I believe someone who is on the fence or interested in learning is going to be better off listening to what you just said than not listening. So I'll leave it there.
Hmm.
You said something in your second row of answering about your experience at Stanford coming from Alberta. And I
Hmm.
don't think it's faux pas anymore in this world to say, San Francisco is, one of the woke, if you will, capitals of the world.
Hmm.
They are a population where people, whether it's like Silicon Valley or in Ivy League schools, where um, stimulant drug use, non-prescribed, is huge.
Hmm.
And I'm not asking you to get into that or say any experiences. That's not my position. But we know that to be true. You can look it up on many sources. And so I'm curious of how you felt your transition was being around others who live and believe a completely different lifestyle than you. And did you ever feel like that affected your grades or advancements in your scientific career?
That's an interesting question. I guess people behave differently, and so that's true wherever you go. People have different choices, and so um, I just yeah, definitely people are engaged in things that I wouldn't necessarily do for various reasons around here. They also have, yeah, different perspectives on um, drugs and alcohol or what have you. And so, uh, as it relates to, I guess, my studies, um, how I would have formally framed it, I guess, when I was Mr. Hotshot trying to be the best, it's like, oh, if they're just throwing away their success that way, then that just means that I have a better chance. I can just go and like they're actively hamstringing their success. If you're out drinking and partying, and then you're gonna be hungover on Saturday morning, I could be in the lab grinding, and I could be getting more work done. So that was kind of my thing. Everything, for me for a long time was in service of productivity and success. So yeah, if it didn't contribute in that way, then I tended not to uh, engage in it. Um, but I didn't really necessarily look down or have a negative view of it per se. I just said, "Oh, that's not what I want. I want to go be Mr. Successful, and therefore I'm going to like make choices that make that the uh, most likely." Um, I wouldn't say. Well, it's hard to say. I haven't really gotten out and talked to too many folks in depth outside of my lab um, here. So, it's a pretty small subset, or even just mechanical engineering. I know a lot of mechanical engineers, aerospace engineers here, and we're all, kind of cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways. So, um, but maybe people in other departments and things, behave differently. So, hope that answers your question.
No, it's fine. It's just an open question. I think that we hear things and we've all have our own experiences around this kind of stuff. Uh,
Hmm.
and it's just interesting to get other people's perspectives on it. The interesting thing about that whole process for me was I would do something similar where every single year on Christmas, I would do like a 30-kilometer long run.
Mm,
And the reasoning, the why behind that was the same thing that you mentioned of, well, they're not going to train on Christmas Day. I'm just going to, grind and I'm better than them. And I think you and me have had similar changes in growth in our careers to different, obviously, avenues. But for me, I think something that's helped me a lot, and I try to share with younger athletes now is it is cliche, but if if your motivations lie in improving yourself or making those that really love you and care about you proud, you're going to have a lot more success on average than trying to do it to be better than other people or um, for the hate. And I'm all for the David Goggins stuff. I'm all for all that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong, I have been. I'm not saying anything that's someone else's life and their decisions and how they want to live it. I know people have done very well and very successful in life. I've just done for my own life when I was living through the viewpoint of like, I'm going to take souls and I'm better than this person because I'm running at 3 a.m. and they're not. Uh, I never actually felt like peace from my mind. And I felt like every time I won, like, what did I gain from that? Like, okay, so I can run better than that guy. What does that gain? What do I gain from that? Like nothing. No one cares.
hmm.
But what do I gain from not running on Christmas Day and spending that time with my family? Well, I gain a lot. So I think that that is like a young man's ego-driven way of like gapping like insecurity or proving things to the wrong crowd. And I think the best revenge is being absent of the need to feel it. It's not super rewarding. So, for an example, this year, for the first time ever, unfollowed like 200 athletes. There's only two athletes that I follow now in the world, and that's Lionel Sanders and our good boy Speedy Pete.
Oh,
And uh, I even the other day I pulled up Strava and I forgot about it for like 2 years. And um, for my own posting and checking, I go in there once a month to look at Peter's training, and I like it all and I follow it all. But I just feel so much better. Like what that scientist is doing over there today, and it's giving them that mental space and energy. I don't think it's going to actually help you better than you just focusing on your work every day. And speaking of work, this is something that's always something that I've always wanted to ask you and dive into a bit. You're not going to admit it because you're humble, but I know your work ethic and all of the things that you check off in your day-to-day life. I don't know too many people that do half of that in a week. So, what are some like tools or methods that you do in your day-to-day life, and that can just be unconscious too or subconscious, that you think allows you to maximize your productivity and time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess the most obvious thing that jumps out to me right away is so I used to work at a consulting company, and in order to get paid, you had to track your hours and what you did every day. And so, even though once I left for grad school to go do my master's degree, I didn't have to do that anymore to get paid. Um, Initially, 'cause I thought I might still become a professional engineer in Canada. In order to check that I had met all the requirements, I thought, okay, I'll keep on tracking my hours. And so as I was in grad school, one thing I did, this is in Toronto, is I maintained my spreadsheet. I have, a column for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then I have different tasks each day, different categories. And so, um, at the end of each day, I would log not just the hours I spent in the lab or just at school, but like actual active, focused, productive time. Um, and so that was different from, work where I was like, oh yeah, I want to check off my 7.5 hours a day so I can get paid. Um, so this was okay. Like if I told myself I need to study this for 3 hours a day or the 3 hours this day, I need to hit that target. Um, and then what that allowed me to do was then, over a few months, I could look back and I had these records of my productivity, and so then you can actually kind of track. And so I had a goal initially when I was in a master's degree. Like, okay, well, if I was working 7.5, 8 hours a day originally in my job, that probably meant aside from meetings, I might have been getting 4 or 5 hours of actual like focused work done. So I'll I'll shoot for that as my baseline. And so if I get more than five, great, that's gravy. But I should be getting for 5 hours of productive focused time um, every day in Monday through Friday. And so um, I just reliably hit that throughout my master's degree, and I was often, above it, right? I was like, 7, 8, um, sometimes, of course, 8 hour, focused productive day means you're, at school for like 10 hours or something. And that's you're really crushing it. So the that's one thing that I did and still do to this day. And so it's allowed me to kind of game the system, if you will. Like it makes sure that um, okay, I need to be keeping this number up at a certain level. And so now, as I'm trying to finish up my degree here more quickly, I've noticed um, I'm working on average 4 hours more per week than I was a year ago. So over the course of 2025, I've been averaging at 4 more hours per week, um, which is it doesn't sound like a lot, right? If you add that up, I figured, okay, what's it? There's 52 weeks in a year. Let's say you take 2 weeks for vacation, so you got 50 and 4 hours, so that's an extra 200 hours um, of work in a year that you get done. Let's say an average 40-hour work week, 200 divided by 40 hours. That's an extra 5 weeks worth of work done. And so, compared to your competition, let's say, that means you're getting at least 10% more work done on average in a year, which compounds too. Because like if you all have the same amount of meetings, the same amount of other non-productive tasks. Let's say you only actually have 20 hours to move the ball forward in your week, and then you add on at least another 5 or another 10 right there. That's 5 hours over 20 hours a week. That means you got 25% more productivity. 10 hours extra, that means you're 50% more productive. So you just like get way more done um, that way by making sure, okay, let's keep chit chat to a minimum. Let's, actually make sure we're eye on the ball, as my dad likes to say. Um, Whenever you're actually, sitting at your desk, make sure you're getting work done and not just, scrolling Facebook or whatever. So I think that's one big thing. That's getting work done for my job. And then one of the YouTubers I like to follow back in the day was Alan Thrall, and he was like, if you're gonna take being in the gym seriously, you got to treat it like your job. You got to schedule your training just like it's task. You got to complete at work. You don't miss training, and you know me, Aaron. Like I don't think I've missed a session other than in the most dire. Like it might be like once a year or something. Like, man, dude, the circumstances conspired. So um, even if I have to move it, I'll get it done. And then likewise, for making sure I eat. I don't track every gram of food anymore because it's much harder to do when you're married. I think I probably still would if I was single, but um, uh, yeah, same with that. Like making sure, okay, I got to get my 4 meals because otherwise I'm skinny as a rail. So get that very consistently. So you're just like, okay, I got these things I got to meet, and you're just like, it's got to get done. Which for a long time, as you alluded to when you're saying, oh yeah, like going on a 30K run on Christmas morning rather than being with your family, that has a cost to it. And so I used to value that really, really highly, and would pursue all these endeavors at the expense of all those other things. And so I think there's a time and a place, of course, for um, sacrificing your own, if you're sacrificing like work success, for example, for the sake of your family, and that's definitely a good thing to do. But also, like, hard work's a good thing, being productive is a good thing. And so if you want to make sure that happens, then you can kind of, that's the thing I've been found really helpful. It's like I've been doing it for the last 7 or 8 years, just tracking my hours. So, and I have logs of all of it. It's great.
Damn. Yeah, no, yeah, your method there is obviously a very beneficial one. And I think that there's different ways to get there, but one of the truest ways to do that is genuinely tracking hours of productivity. When you look at, for an example, on Apple, you've probably never looked at this, honestly, knowing you, but
Yeah.
on screen, you can look at the screen time and it says productivity. And I think that's a really skewed number because, like you said, if you are saying that I'm putting in 3 hours of productivity, but every 15 minutes you scroll Instagram for 5 minutes, like it's a skewed number, right? So you have to be very objective with yourself. I found that I have I've been very fortunate to have people like yourself and others that are very considered top performers in their fields across the world in many different sports. And one of the things I've noticed is that they're a lot more average than you think they are. And I'm not taking away from your world class accomplishments at Stanford or anything like that. I mean, like the average person doesn't give themselves enough chance or opportunity to get there. So for me, when I am doing like 3 hours of rehab a day right now, coming off my surgery, researching and studying and doing these podcasts with a fucking general aerospace scientist, Harvard surgeon, and all that kind of stuff, helping on the farm, all the things that I got going on. One thing that I've always found for myself too is like the first thing that the easiest thing to do is to create more time by removing it. So this is not hyperbole. I've I've looked at it actually the other day. In the last 3 months, I spent 2 hours on Netflix. And that's just the cost that it takes, or sacrifice, if you will, it takes to be able to land these conversations with great guests, to be able to rehab at a world class level and all of these different things. And I always kind of talk about the end goal as because I learned that from someone like you, obviously, so I learned it from. But if your end goal is to be a world record holder in athletics, that's going to dramatically change and dictate the amount of work you're going to have to put in versus someone who wants to keep generally fit and not get overweight in their lifetime. One can be done in 4 hours, the other one takes over 20 hours a week. So I often think that people, I found anyways, to my experience, is that people tend to want to have these audacious goals or become exceptional at something, but they don't get enough done. But you could easily sub out Netflix time, just one thing, Netflix time, and get that time right there. Do you know
Mhm.
what I mean? So there's always one thing that I had an athlete one time who was not good at doing the mobility work. And he was a heavyweight athlete, and it's something that he really needed to work on. And one day we're in the gym, and I was like, "How much time do you spend on Netflix?" He's like, "Oh, I watch like a show or two every night." Got it. So you're telling me you can't lay down on the couch or get a foam roll or whatever it is while you're watching Netflix or just turn it off? And I think one way that you would agree with me is that if you it's a very military term, but like if you limit distractions and narrow your focus, you can be amazed how much you can get done in a day. And then
Mhm.
one thing that you said that I think is great, and I never thought about it this way, but looking at the hours spent is one thing, but when you look at the percentage increase, it's mind blowing. Like you said
Mhm.
something like 10 extra hours is actually 50% more productive. So like 10 hours doesn't sound as much as you think it does, but that's
Yeah, it carries huge effects.
I don't know the math off my head, if it's double or 50%, whatever you would know.
Hmm.
But the sorry, my mouth's pretty dry tonight. But yeah, so another thing that I've noticed, and this is something that yeah, I've done it more and more lately, is I try to minimize the time I spend thinking about the work, like, and just doing the work. And you seem like to me, and I don't know actually know this, we haven't talked about this before ever. You don't strike me as a guy that's going to sit there for an hour and a half with a cold plunge and a long morning routine and 25 rituals thinking about mindfulness and all the work you have to do. You're actually just going to get up and work and just get the work done. So one thing that I always tell myself, because I'm not nearly as productive as you are, is if I have a whole bunch of shit to do in my day, I got a long list, just get up and work. Tackle the biggest thing, of course, first, but just fucking work. And I had a roommate once that was a med student. And it's funny how someone can have one sentence or two in your life that you'll keep forever. And this was like 7 years ago. And this lady came into his office crying because she was so behind on his work. And he said, all of the time that you spent to come here could have been spent on studying the work. And I've always kind of carried that with me. And then as I'm finishing up my rant here, something that someone asked me the other day of how I improve my speaking skills and like my vernacular and those kinds of things. And I told them that my inner dialogue is almost always on improvement. There's very little time in my life that I ever think about LeBron James, Kim Kardashian. I'm a huge LeBron fan, or what's up with celebrity gossip or what's going on in the world. I'm like today when I was driving around, I spend most of my time thinking about our conversation and playing out different scenarios in my head. Like if it goes this way, maybe we'll go this way. How should I present this if this comes up? So I'm very, very prepared. But I think a
Hmm.
lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about unnecessary bullshit like their sports team on a Sunday. And to finish off on this is that I don't think that you are better than someone else. I think that people who have a grand end goal, when they go to bed every day, they know if they put in the work or not to get them
Hmm.
closer to that. And I think that you build a really bad relationship with yourself if you're subconsciously in resentment because you decided to be lazy and not get the work done. So I don't think you have to work 100 hours a week, but if you want to be an aerospace scientist at Stanford, you're going to have to. I don't think you got to train 20 hours a week, but if you want to be an Olympic athlete, you have to. There's no other way of doing it. So I wanted to just share your side of it and my side of it on that because I think those are tools that can really help people get things done from two people in different fields that seem to be right now getting a lot of things done in their day to day.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that I also think about is, what do you lose by working hard, right? Like, at the end, worst case, it's all wasted effort, and turns out the thing you were working on actually doesn't pan out at all, right? But then, what did you lose? I guess for your example, being on Netflix, oh, you lost the opportunity to watch a handful of shows on Netflix, right? And you're gonna I remember being in Toronto when I was doing a master's degree, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna hit the gym 3 4 days a week. I think I committed the minimum three, and then I'll try to do a fourth. Um, I figured, okay, like I'll work hard during the day, and then once my brain is fried, can't study anymore, then I'll go to the gym. And because in worst case, then I'm really tired at the end of the day, then I sleep well, and then the next day I'm at least refreshed and I can keep on going. And I haven't really lost anything other than the chance to watch some Netflix, I suppose. Now, I mean, there is obviously caveats, right? Like, let's say you're a parent and your hard work means you're missing your kid's soccer game or whatever. That's a cost, and so you have obligations and responsibilities um, to tend to that are perhaps not you banging your head against the wall working at your 9 to 5 job or whatever. But um, yeah, as long as if you're not being lazy and you're actually putting your working and putting time in on the things that are your responsibilities and you're diligently doing it, then if it fails, then you can't look back and be like, oh man, I should have done something differently. Like you're just you have at least control that you can control is the term I think you've used. And also it's in the book I don't know if anybody's read it, the Open by Andre Agassi, the world class tennis player. Um, that was his big pivotal thing. He got really into yeah, controlling all the stuff he could control. So um, yeah, I think that's the rub.
Yeah, I think people would be very shocked that they can have a good family life or a relationship with their girlfriends or boyfriends and be successful in their, whether it's athletics or their career endeavors. You can do it all, but because there's so many people. There are professional sports athletes or Olympic athletes, medical students. There's a guy who's a medical student right now with a fiance, and he's also a pro triathlete. It's just the
Mhm.
difference is that like the military uses terms of like dials and switches. I learned that from a guy named DJ Shipley. And in order for me to show up well for my current girlfriend, help my family around the farm, rehab and do all these podcasts, that means that my dials on all of those things are turned very high, which means that the dials of other things in life, like leisure, have to be turned down. But I've never felt this seriously, I've never felt bad cutting out leisure time to help my mom or little
Mhm.
brother and those kinds of things. They're meaningful, right? So I think you can kind of do it all because I definitely don't think anyone is going to be happier in life becoming a CEO billionaire and not start raising a family and having and a wife and a husband. But I think you can do a lot by just limiting those leisures. And I read something about you, and I don't know if this is true, and I've never known this about you until like 2 days ago. Did you have rejection for your initial PhD programs?
Yeah. So yeah, the admissions procedures at these universities can be challenging. Um, so of course, me thinking I'm the bee's knees and Mr. Hotshot, I wasn't taking no for an answer. So what happened was I got an offer letter, or rather, no, I had offer letters from two other schools, but I really wanted to go and work with my PhD advisor, who's um, he's in his 80s, and long story short, he was the first person to put a laser in a shock tube. Those are some words I haven't talked about yet. But anyways, he's very well recognized in the field, and he's made a lot of advancements and has a lot of funding. And so to work in his lab is a huge opportunity. And so I knew that I wanted to come here. And so, I had been notified that I was in the last pool of, I don't know, 200 or something for the entrance class for the year, but only 50 get accepted or something like that. So finally, what I got was a message um, basically saying, "Oh yeah, better luck next time." All the people that have been notified for interviews have been notified at this point, and you're not one of them. Um, and so I had been corresponding with my PhD advisor for the last year prior, because I had been planning to come to Stanford for quite a while, and I wanted to make sure that all my ducks were in a row. And so, anyways, I've been corresponding with him for a while, and so I emailed him basically saying, um, tactfully, of course. But I've done all these things. I have this transcript from a master's degree. I've published these articles. I've been reviewing the literature, all these things. I'm very ready to come and work for you in your lab. And so I'm surprised that I was not admitted. And so I had nothing to lose, because worst case, I just don't get into Stanford. So I figured I might as well send the email anyways. And but I think, it wasn't me just being like, "Man, I want to get in, so why aren't you letting me in?" I think I had good reasons to. I was confused, but I was also very prideful, being like, "Oh man, I think I'm Mr. Hotshot. I should get in." Um, so, anyways, I emailed him, and then push came to shove, my application was deemed to be good, and so I got in. But yeah, that was a little hiccup that I didn't anticipate.
I mean, I really like philosophy and spirituality to a sense, and Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca. But one thing I will always come back on is I do believe there is a time and a place where your ego helps get things done. And that is a perfect example of when it does, when for not taking no for an answer. I think that there are times where it's helpful. So I'm glad that that worked out for you. I read it about you and we never talked about it. So I was like, is this actually true? There's some like bullshit online. I think I'll get crushed if I have you on here and don't talk about a couple topics.
All right,
And
certainly.
Yeah. And I know these aren't your most favorite topics. So it's actually funny. I don't know if you remember, but a couple of years ago, maybe a year ago, this account kept popping up on my algorithm, and it was called like the Flat Earther or something. And it
Hmm.
was videos of guys that made TikTok videos explaining why the Earth is actually flat. And then I would just jokingly send these clips to you, and you would respond like with a paragraph or whatever. And I get it because I don't know. I was kind of a dick in a way because I know it would get you fired up, but it's just like a funny little conversation, right? And I personally don't believe the world the Earth is flat, but sometimes it's fun playing devil's advocate, and that's not my plan here today because I
Uh-huh.
will lose. I will lose very very quickly in that debate with you. But what are your thoughts? Do you think the freaking Earth is flat? Like, what are the like? You taught me something. I'm gonna butcher it, but you taught me like the empiricalness of data, right? So like
Hmm.
the best is that gravity is real, and the lowest is whatever, whatever, whatever. And I think your scale was like from 1 to 10 of certainty or different
Hmm.
tiers. So
Yeah,
where are
sure.
you on the Earth is not flat. Number one, and number two, if any of these individuals who spend a lot of time researching that there's a flat Earth,
Yeah.
if you got to pick a scientist in aerospace, anyone you want, and they debated, what would the outcome be?
Yeah. The Earth is not flat. The Earth is round. It's not a perfect sphere, but pretty round. And we can know this. You can do various experiments, and right. So like the the premise of science is that there is truth you're trying to seek, trying to find, and you wish to perform experiments that'll give you a yes or a no answer, a hypothesis that can give you a yes or a no answer to guide you and direct you towards whether or not something is true. And so, an experiment one might envision for testing whether or not the Earth is flat, is you could say, okay, let's say we assume it's round, and that the sun is very far away, as it seems to be. And so, what we can do one experiment that has been done, and it was actually originally done, I think a long time ago, centuries, maybe millennia. Um, to figure out whether the Earth is round is to estimate the actual diameter of the Earth, diameter implying round. Um, is if you have the sun that's really far away, that's effectively a point source of light, and all the rays, all the light rays, once they reach us, are effectively parallel. And so, if you dig a well straight down um, at one point on the Earth, and then go, some number of miles, a few hundred miles away, um, and at the same instant in time, you have another well, you can see, okay, if at noon the sun rays hit the very bottom of the well, there's no shadows. Um, but then with the other well, there is a shadow. Light doesn't hit the bottom of the well. Then you know, okay, that this well is at this angle, and the other one that's far away is at this angle, because all the light, let's say in this example, is coming straight down. And so that would imply that these wells, even though you drilled them both straight down, that means the surface of the Earth is curved. Um, That'd be one example. An experiment that would, I guess, test whether the Earth is flat and not curved would be, we typically use, we know that water is flat, and so you could perhaps have some folks in two boats go, close by, have the boats at a certain level, and have, say, a 6 foot tall pole um, or something on each boat at the same height. So, like these two reference points are at the same height on each boat relative to the surface of the water. And then you could have the light source, for example, on one of them, and then the other one could have a hole at the same height. So you shine the light, and then it passes through the hole, or through. Let's say it holes on both posts. Light passes through both holes. That's going straight, and if they're at the same height, and if the world is at least it's flat or up very close to flat when they're close together. If you take those boats very far apart, many miles, and you have small holes, such you can be very sensitive to the height differences and therefore curvature. Um, if you notice that the light no longer passes through both holes on both boats, um, that would suggest that it's curved. And if you raise the one of the posts up again by an amount corresponding to, for example, that you would expect with the curvature of a certain amount, you raise it up and you see it again, then that would imply that it's that the Earth is round. And in fact, there's a YouTube video of some flat earthers trying that ladder experiment that I described, and what I just described happened. They go far apart, the light no longer goes through both holes, and then they raise it up, and like lo and behold, the light goes through again. And their conclusion is, "Huh, this doesn't agree with our theory," and yet they continue on being flat earthers. But um, if you reject the test, not on the grounds of it being a bad test, but on like you just don't like the answer, then you're not doing science. You're just being a goofball. So that's what I would say. So I'm very certain that the Earth is round, for many other reasons too. But I would let people just rest on experiment, because that can be very concrete evidence that something is true, or at least certainly not false.
Yeah, there's a couple of thoughts I have on this real quick. Is that oftentimes certain arguments happen where things were conspiracy and now are
Hmm.
true. And for example, Bohemian Grove was this massive conspiracy forever until someone broke in and videoed the event happening, and now everyone knows like it actually happened.
Hmm.
So I think maybe some people have a false sense of confidence, but there's actually a line by Kendrick Lamar in a song. It's actually the song I listened to before all the podcasts that I play. And one of the lines in that is he said that he despises people who use propaganda for their salary. And I think about that probably more than I should. But I also feel like now in the day and age with social media, that you're one post away from becoming rich and going viral, right? So some of these guys, it's hard to tell if they're serious or not, because maybe some of them definitely are. But also some other ones will post things just to get clicks and views because they know it will, and it drives up. So they might look like an idiot in public, but they don't really care because they're banking millions on the back end through sponsorships, right? So I think
Hmm.
like a little bit of that like disingenuous behavior definitely occurs. One thing I noticed though is whenever I send you videos on my life, I was so long ago, actually forget the account and the guy's name, but whenever I sent you videos, it seemed as if within maybe a minute of watching it, you would send a response stating like how flawed that method is.
Hmm.
Not even getting to the abstract of it, but just the foundation of the study. If you try to do that in, let's say, grade 11 biology, that high school teacher that was a jock in high school would
Hmm.
say like that's not, you can't do that, let alone someone who's at Stanford with aerospace. And I don't want to be elitist, but it seems like it's so far from like fundamental ways of conducting literature and experiments that it's almost laughable. I personally think I mean, I believe in some conspiracies and I'm happy to share them, but that is one I don't believe in. But I just wanted to get your opinion on it. And then another one that I conspiracy. So I guess you could say technically it is a conspiracy because I believe that there still hasn't been 100% concrete fact proving it. But it's interesting because for me, 15, 20 years ago, if you said aliens are real, you'd be a crazy person. So the
Hmm.
industry that I used to work in, the restaurant industry, being a general manager, I was around who knows how many people in my day-to-day life for a decade.
Yeah.
And over time, when that topic comes up, overwhelmingly people believe they're real. And then there's been a few things. Bob Lazar's story for sure. And there's been some individuals like Brian Graves, who was an Air Force One pilot, who had crazy security clearances, and they have like on the military grade um,
Hmm.
cameras and imaging. They've seen crafts move at speeds and maneuvering that's not possible to the current knowledge of physics. So I'm curious where you stand on this. If you had to, for figure of speech, if you had a gun to your head and you had to make a decision if aliens are real or not, what would you think?
I would think that it's pretty unlikely that aliens exist.
Mm,
This is related to, I guess, the origins of life too, right? So um, the likelihood of so if you look at all life forms that we've seen so far have RNA or DNA. So DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and it's a very so it's the double helix molecule with a very, very complicated and intricate structure. And that's an essential building block and found in the nucleus of um, all of the cells and all the living organisms that we have. I'm not a biologist, so if any biologists ever watch this, forgive me, but that's loosely speaking, that's how I understand it. And so um, the likelihood of these very complex large molecules forming and then orienting themselves and orchestrating themselves in such a way that they constitute not just a living organism, but a living organism that can reproduce. Um, it seems if it happened, if if that is how life began and God used that to um, catalyze life in the universe, then sure, maybe it happened once, but the likelihood of it happening a second time, let's say we take an atheistic position or a position that's not religious, the likelihood of it happening in general is very, 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 very low, like unreasonably low. Um, that it could happen, and us, for life to even our life to even have started that way, and so for it to have happened a second time, um, and then for an intelligent life form to have come about and then also not have destroyed themselves, as we tend to have the tendency to do, um, seems very unlikely to me. So, also just the vast, vast distances required in space travel, even just within our solar system, let alone galaxy and intergalactic. Like it'd be a whole thing. It's the distances are just stupendous. So, um, perhaps there's physics that we don't know about, and you could do different, I don't know, different wormholes or what have you, and some alien could manage to come over here and find us. But it seems very unlikely to me. Pertaining to the observations of certain people, um, people can hallucinate and people can see things. People can lie or misrepresent facts for their own personal gain. Um, or you could be dead honest, but then yeah, you just your eyes deceived you. And so um since we haven't been able to collect any evidence as such, um it seems unlikely that aliens also exist. That's
Got
my
it.
position, I would say.
Love it. And then another one that's going to be interesting is the probability, if any, that we will ever live on Mars.
Hmm, that's a good one.
Because, real quick, one more thing. I think I'll share this, is that I really enjoy Elon Musk. There's a couple of things that kind of freak me out, but overall, I think if you look at him objectively, I don't think there's any entrepreneur ever that has had, don't quote me on this, but it's like $4 or $5 billion valued companies. And I think what he's done is extraordinary. And if you remove recent politic bias from him and just look at it objectively, I think he's done some tremendous things. And I believe as of right now, he's putting rockets into space more frequently than NASA. And it's a private company. So I think he's phenomenal for aerospace. Again, I'm not in aerospace in any fucking world of the imagination, but in that world, from an outside perspective, I feel like he's crushing it more than anyone.
Hmm.
And if you want to speak on him, you can. You don't have to. But and the other part is, yeah, like he's firmly, to my knowledge, from what I've seen him on interviews and podcasts, that we will habitate Mars in our lifetime. And I'm curious if your thoughts on that in whichever way you want to answer it.
Okay. um yeah, I mean, I haven't really looked into the Mars thing all that much. I'm interested in hypersonics, rockets, and all that stuff. Just academically, it's pretty exciting. Like when you look at there's a plane called the SR-71 Blackbird. I don't know if you know it. It's a really famous military plane. It's the only reason they don't use it anymore is or to my knowledge, who knows, uh, is that it's too expensive. It's not technically obsolete. Like it hasn't been usurped by some better technology. It's just very expensive to operate. Very cool aircraft. So I'm very excited about all this stuff just for like, wow, this is so impressive that these things can actually be made and overcome all these challenges. And so, what SpaceX is doing and just all these various rocket companies and the privatization of space travel and things like that is all very exciting because you get efficiencies. by privatizing, and you have different incentives. Um, so regarding Mars, we have yet to actually send someone living to Mars. So I think to say within our lifetime that there's going to be people like colonizing it is perhaps a little bit ambitious. Um, but then I don't know, it might be possible. Like the whole notion that if we began to put abundant carbon dioxide on Mars, such that the greenhouse effect became stronger, and that the surface temperature of Mars rose, that it could become habitable, and then you could, let's say, plant some plants that could then live and consume some of that CO2, produce oxygen, create a habitable um, atmosphere, such that we could then breathe without having to live in domes. You know, conceptually, it's might hold water. Um, So I don't think it's likely that it's going to happen within our lifetime, just because we have yet to even just send someone that vast distance. Um, but I'm not saying it's not possible. I don't think he's absolutely nuts for thinking it's feasible eventually. Um, Space travel though is really exciting, just as far as making at least humans a multi-planetary or multi planetary like object species. It'd be interesting. Like I read a book that was written by the founder of the University of Toronto Institute for Aerospace Studies, where I did a master's degree, a guy named Gordon Patterson, also from Edmonton, Alberta. Fun fact. He wrote a book called Priorities and Geolunar Space. And it talked about how, you could, if you were to, um, so the moon is rich in minerals. And if you were to go to the moon and mine on the moon, one really neat advantage of going and extracting minerals from the moon uh, is that then you could manufacture things in space more easily. And so I'll explain for a few reasons why. Um, Earth is very hard to leave. Um, with a rocket, we have a very deep gravity well, such that the vast majority of the mass of a rocket is um, based on propellant. So like when you have the big Apollo rockets, Saturn V, I don't know what the figure is exactly, but like 90% of the mass of the thing is propellant, meaning like the fuel tanks and the oxidizer. All that stuff that's in those tanks eventually just gets sent out the back end of the rocket just to be able to get the rocket to leave Earth and get it to be able to orbit. Very, very expensive because Earth is very massive and has a very deep gravity well. The moon is much smaller, and so it would be easier to leave. This would be the same for Mars too. Mars is not as massive, and so it'd be easier to leave Mars, though Mars is heavier than the moon. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I haven't looked into the Mars thing all that much, but back to the moon and the Earth. So if you were to extract, let's say, minerals from the moon, you could do so much less expensively, provided you got there. And then if you brought the minerals off of the moon and then had some space station between the moon and the Earth, what you could do is you could begin to um, manufacture materials and make alloys in ways that would not be feasible on Earth. Because um, when you're making an alloy uh, on Earth, you have to let it cool inside the gravity well, and so different metals have different densities, and so there's going to be just non-uniformities um, within your material, just based on the different densities. Some material scientists are probably going to get mad at me because I'm butchering it, but anyways, there would be advantages to making materials and alloys in space, because you could make larger crystals and things like that would be very difficult to do. And so that's an exciting thing with space travel, making it cheaper, is because things like that could become feasible. We could actually have manufacturing in space and make metals that are stronger, and it could be like going from bronze to steel, or having strength increases like that, and make those materials cheaper. So I think that's pretty exciting. And so and also, yeah, going to Mars is pretty exciting if there are, let's say there is an asteroid that's going to come hit Earth. I don't think that's the way humanity is going to be doomed. But let's say that was your concern, then going to Mars, of course, for that reason would be good. And so, quite exciting. It is pretty amazing the amount of technological advancements that have happened. Rocketry only began just over a century ago, and so now we're already considering going to other planets, which is pretty fantastic.
You can't say that without me asking a low hanging fruit question.
Yeah.
And if technology has advanced so dramatically, which clearly it has, there's no denying that. If anyone does, they don't know what they're talking about.
Hmm.
Shouldn't it be very easy to go back to the moon?
Uh, yeah. I mean, it's just a question of what do you gain by going back to the moon right now. It's the Yes, it should be feasible. I mean, really, it's amazingly impressive that it was able to be accomplished so quickly in the '60s. Um, the Apollo missions. So yeah, in principle, it should be feasible. But the thing is, like, there were different incentives at the time, right? Like the Cold War, it was very important that the United States was able to go to the moon to demonstrate their military might and technological might, such that they were still making strides to demonstrate to the USSR that they were able to keep up because the USSR put Sputnik in space. It was the first satellite. So um, it was very important militarily that the United States would go to the moon, and collecting some moon rocks and bringing them back was also helpful just from a scientific perspective. But is it worth the what would be billions of dollars now to do it again if the minerals have not revealed something that's super exciting? Because when you get into economics, it's always trade-offs. Um, so if we spend $1 billion to go to the moon to get a bunch of minerals that we could have just gotten on Earth more easily for $500 million, then we should just not bother going to the moon if that's the goal.
Yeah, fair. That's fair. I think that one of the misconceptions right there that you just cleared up is the people who have either the financial or the brain capacity to do it are focused on things that haven't been done yet or different um, avenues within uh, aerospace or sciences. So yeah, that makes sense to me. So you're dead no on flat Earth, almost dead no on aliens, definitely possibility for Mars. If they wanted to go back to moon, invest that money and energy, they could. They just want to go focus on other things, which I don't disagree with. And something we're coming up to the end of. I know you said you're kind of in a 2 hour time slot, so I want to be respectful and be in integrity for your time. But you have by far one of the greatest quotes that anyone has ever said,
Oh
and
dear.
um, it was actually it was actually like the screensaver of my phone for I think 3 or 4 weeks after you texted it to me. And so I'll tell the story. I'll share the quote. I want your perspective on it, and we'll see where we end up for time then.
All right.
So a lot of people that would listen would know probably about my story, not everyone. So, and I don't have enough time to go into all of it, but most people know that I got 50s in high school, dropped out of college, went to second chance school programs, not formally educated. And I changed my life trajectory and ended up meeting some really cool people like yourself and accomplishing some pretty, what people consider pretty extraordinary physical feats in athletics. And one thing that I've learned in life is the best way to have extraordinary people in your life is to become extraordinary at something. Because when I started to do these physical feats that was blowing people's minds, that is when, like, one of my friends who and guest on the podcast tomorrow morning actually is a former tier one operator for the military, or these big name people, or the Harvard surgeon that saved my life a couple times. Anyways, was because they're like, holy fucking shit, how do you do this? And they're enamored by it or drawn to it as equally as I'm drawn to your aerospace knowledge and so forth. So I recorded on November 5th the longest conversation to date that a 3-star general or above in the Canadian military has ever had. And that conversation was a non scripted, non planned question. He just took it on the chin. Any questions? He was great about it. And I asked him some pretty tough questions like I have with you today. And I was definitely in my head a lot going into that. And I sent you a text and I said, it's crazy that I'm just some random nobody dropout that's going to be podcasting with a 3-star general tomorrow. And you said that the quote is that your credentialism doesn't matter as long as you rise to the occasion. I'm a quote guy. Everyone that knows me knows I'm a big quote guy, philosophical
Mhm.
guy. Post quotes freaking every day on my Instagram or every whatever frequently. And that quote gave me chills through my whole body. And I think that was a big reason why when I went into that conversation with Steve, my mantra for my mental preparation changed to I belong here. And not in the sense that I belong in the military with a 3-star general, but I belong in this conversation in that I speak well, I do my research, and I know how to talk to people about life, even if I can't talk about aerospace terminology or military terminology. And that conversation, I can't wait for everyone who's going to see it because it turned out to be really good. So at the end of my rant here, I'll repeat the quote again, and I'm curious if you could dive into a little bit on what that means to you, because I find it crazy because you're crazy credentialed.
Mm.
And obviously, I won't use their name, but there was someone that was in my life at one point in a romantic way. And during I don't use the word altercation because that sounds violent. During like an argument, one of the things that came up was that I'm not credentialed. And of course, did they mean it in that moment? Probably not. But obviously, my ego was of the position that, well, let's compare what we've done in life with you having credentialed university, me not. Obviously, it's a terrible way to think, but that's where my head was at the time. You are someone who is infinitely more credentialed than majority of the population. Yet you're also someone that said that your credentialism doesn't matter as long as you can rise to the occasion. So what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm happy that it impacted you positively. So that's good. It what I think about it is that there's a lot of people that can get highfalutin degrees that actually don't mean a whole lot. And so there are certain fields that can be that aren't that well foundation. They can sound really, you can get a degree in I don't know uh, something from some big university, but if you don't actually translate it into something useful or productive, like what have you gained? What have you actually really done? Um, and so conversely, if you're I don't know, some Joe Schmo who doesn't even have a high school diploma, but you're actually, contributing to your community in a meaningful way. Then that's more valuable than Joe Schmo with your big fancy Harvard or Stanford PhD, who's just sitting in an ivory tower, not actually doing a whole lot, and in fact, just getting funding um, from taxpayers by saying, "Oh yes, what I'm doing is very important," for claiming, "Yes, I'm a big dog scientist at some university." I'm not actually contributing to the world in that meaningful way. Um, and so I guess the other side of it is that um, you know if you wanted to become a pro tennis player, for example, often people would go to big tennis academies or what have you and train with the top people. And sure, that's a good thing, but ultimately, as long as you can win the tennis match, you're fine, right? Like uh, when push comes to shove, ultimately you have to just deliver the results. And so if you can deliver the results and you can stand behind them, you can demonstrate whatever it is true. For example, in sciences, then you don't necessarily need to have your big fancy degree, or if you, just because you didn't go to Stanford and you went to some, for example, no-name university in the Midwest, where you're still doing fantastic science, then um, who cares where you've gone? I mean, there are definitely advantages to going to um, big schools. Like I said before that I'm extremely grateful to have been given the opportunity to come and work with my PhD advisor. He's very well known in field, and he's very knowledgeable. He's he's been doing this type of research much longer than I've been alive, which is pretty amazing. Like the statement of he's probably forgotten more about shock tubes than I'll ever know would probably apply. And so there's definitely advantages to going to these schools if indeed that big credential. So we're referring to it is associated with good quality resources and actually good learning. But um, just saying, oh, I have this um, credential and just lording it over someone, even if they're even if it can demonstrate that you're wrong, then your credential doesn't really mean as much as you would like it to mean. So um, I yeah, it's important to judge people based on as individuals and actually uh, look at their individual track records. And so I think touching on what you said earlier, like one of the reasons why you've been interesting to a number of folks that you mentioned is that if you ran what was it, 2 marathons and did 1,500 pull-ups within 24 hours, and you were on track for 2,000. Just you had a forearm issue, if I'm remembering correctly. That just takes grit, and you can't learn that from a book. You just have to go do it. And so um, that's yeah, no credential is going to tell you that other than the fact that oh, I legitimately did this thing that's actually very very hard to do. So um, yeah, I hope that makes sense. That's kind of what I meant with that comment.
No, it's great. I think it's a really good topic to leave off on because I feel that some of it has gotten lost into this to the to the ego, right? Where you are elitist because you attended a certain university,
Hmm.
or I am right without due process because of my title. If
Hmm.
you're a lawyer that went to Harvard versus a small school, the judge is going to not go off of what school you went to. He's going to make a decision who wins the case based on the evidence, so forth.
Hmm.
So I'm not downplaying um, getting a PhD. I think both sides of the spectrum get it wrong, and I think there's kind of a middle ground to it. But it's interesting you said this because I thought I said something a long time ago about this. So I went down my archives to my Instagram, and I posted this maybe 2021, I think. And the quote that I had was, the letters beside your name mean nothing compared to the numbers that you put on the board. And I have people in my life like yourself that I think have done both. And transparently, and maybe this does sound egocentric, there are people that I know that I could have on this podcast that I won't have on this podcast because they have a lot of letters and not a lot of results on the board.
Hmm.
And that just doesn't motivate me or interest me. I'm far more interested in people who have results on the boards. And then if I do find people that have both, then that's great. But example for you is you squatting 405. And when you think about it in a powerlifting world, it's pretty normal now. But in
Yeah.
terms of people that are getting their PhD in aerospace and mechanical engineering at Stanford, it's pretty non-existent. Maybe like I know maybe a few people have done it. So those people who have those unique, maybe not unique, but more unique stories is very interesting to me. And it's interesting too because Elon Musk has this one where he is making this comment on an interview. And I'm paraphrasing, so I'm going to butcher this, but he was going on a rant about how MBAs aren't very useful in his company, and that he doesn't care if you have an MBA or where you got your MBA. All he cares about is your work the best of the best? And if your work is the best of the best without an MBA, he wants you at Tesla. And I think that in closing on this, you can apply that to most fields. Obviously, to be a friggin' surgeon, you got to go through medical school. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course, there are fields where you need that. Aerospace for sure. But in terms of most fields, you can find people who are much better with far less credentials for that role. So I don't think that your credentials is causation for greatness. I think it's just correlate a bad correlation data of 2 points, and it's easy to debunk that. However, all of the people, regardless of their credentials, that have reached greatness, there is causation that they've all had to work incredibly hard. And one of the stories that I tell quickly is one of the people that I'm been fighting to get him on here. It's been one of my best friends for years. And when I asked him to come on, he at first said, like, man, look at your guests. I'm just a correction officer in Kingston, Ontario. But he overcame a 6-year long opioid addiction. And he was high functioning, by the way. Like, he had a good job, great looking guy, like, had it together from the outside perspective. I don't think that if I had to pick one person in the world to um, marry someone in my family, he would be the person that I pick first in the entire world that I know. And and that's not a shot to anyone else, but he is just such a great human being. And he overcoming a 6-year long opioid addiction is significantly more challenging than getting, in my opinion, getting maybe a credential in athletics like I did, or a credential maybe in a different field. I can't speak to those ones because obviously I didn't do it, but um, I think there's a lot of value in the story and the character of the person versus um, evaluating them from an external place. And I don't think that's very Christian like either. So,
Hmm.
or you would know more than me, or what Jesus would profess to do. I think you can learn a lot from people in different walks of life um, that are below you, if you will. And I think it's important that I shared that today with you because it's really cool that you have that perspective. And I think that's definitely one of the reasons why you've stood out to me. Um, and I'll say this before we wrap up. I talk about you quite a bit with some of my friends, and not because you're an aerospace scientist or mechanical engineer scientist, all of that stuff. If I have a big life decision, I've had a couple. So one of them was between two job offers 5 years ago. The other one was to leave a current job where I was on a good trajectory to a different business and a higher up role. And another one was recently this summer about a romantic situation that I was involved in. And I thought to myself, the three biggest life decisions that I've made, because I believe who your partners for the rest of your life is probably the biggest, but the three biggest life decisions I've made career wise and romantically, all three times you were the person that I went to for my endpoint result because you've been able to balance clearly a lot of intellect, but mixed with your faith and a really good ability to remove bias. So when I asked for feedback or your opinion, I don't think you actually cared about my feelings that much, and not in a bad way. You didn't,
Yeah.
but not in a bad way. That's what you need. Because I think oftentimes when we look at, like, I don't know, therapy or friendships or whatever, if I tell you that I'm going to do something and it's going to be bad, most friends are just going to be like, yeah, bro, or get it, girl, like, yeah, he's wrong or she's wrong. It's like, but if I call you and I'm like, hey man, this is my plan, and you think it's dumb, you're gonna say, you're nice, you're nicer than I am, but you're gonna say, this is why this isn't a good idea, and you need to really take a step back here and look through this. And I think that that's important, and hopefully other people find others in their life that uh, can can do that, because I'm certainly one of them. People come to me and they're looking for like that out of like some vindictive shit their ex or their girlfriend or boyfriend did or something. And I'm like, dude, listen to yourself. Look what you did. Like, you're the reason why you're here, anyways. So I think it's really cool you spent some time with us today. There's going to be a lot of very cool clips coming out because I think that this is almost a two-part podcast of science transitioning into Christianity and diving deeper into that religion. And the other half will be on things that are productive and tools for um, careers and work ethic, and the little fun stuff that people want to hear, which is Mars, flat
Yeah.
Earth, aliens, and all that kind of stuff. So I appreciate your time, and it's been a great time for sure. And thank you for being patient with this impromptu studio now that I'm in, which is a kitchen that I wasn't planning for, but we made it work. So I appreciate for your patience. Um, I guess if you want to leave it off right where you can find you, if you're interested in that or anything you want to leave it off on, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, well, the stuff I've been most proud of academically lately is going to be in journal articles that are behind a paywall. So that might be tough to find. Though my PhD dissertation should be coming out soon, so that'd be um, you can probably find that once it's published on the lab website. So I work in a place called the Hanson Lab at Stanford University, and so Hanson, Hanson, hanson.stanford.edu is the lab I work in. So you can come check out kind of what we do here if anyone's interested. And then um, yeah, other than that, I'm basically not on social media, and I keep a pretty low profile otherwise. So
Yeah, what's crazy?
um, I-
It's funny because my the two guests I have this week are two people that don't have social media. So it's a very interesting way of preparing for these conversations. My friend Brian tomorrow, he's the former tier one operator. He's never had social media. So, and oddly enough, both of you have some many things in common. And
mm,
I think you guys both epitomize the limit distractions, narrow your focus, whether you know that from military or just unconscious genius, but you guys live very similarly. One thing that I want to do for obviously yourself and anyone that I have on is for spending the time, of course, I'm going to share and promote everyone's work as much as I possibly can. So the week that this drops, which I don't know yet, I'm still waiting on a couple episodes before I can release these things. I'm learning in the podcast world, there's a lot more behind the scene logistics than I anticipated, but it's all good. Once the first one drops, I'll have a whole bunch planned. They're going to be great. So when yours does drop, uh, I'll I'll get all the links and I'll hyperlink them in my social media and Spotify and post and stuff, so anyone can access you or reach out. And I don't know if you ever give your work email or something, but any information you want to be shared to the world, I will commit to linking all of that so it's accessible um, to you and to everyone else.
all right, cool. Well, thanks, Aaron.
Got it. If you just want to stay on after I close this out, I want to chat with you for a sec.
Yeah, yeah, no problem.